this one even more so to take out David with, again, no intention. Maybe I'm live on YouTube. We're not sure. Molly's smiling. We'll see. So for those of you who were trying to watch on YouTube, sorry. But anyways, so here we are now with the promise of Michal. But no. If we skip on down through and we go clear down to verse 25 in 1 Samuel 18, verse 25, we see, say this to David, okay? Saul is sending his servants to David. And here's King Saul's request. The king desires no other bride price. Meaning, I expect no other money, no other whatever that you would pay to get my daughter, no other, money given to the father, that was customary in that day. He said, I require no other price for her except 100 Philistine foreskins to take revenge on his enemies. I want the foreskins of 100 Philistines. That's what I want. Now, the Philistines were a force to be reckoned with. And Saul knew this, okay? And yet it says, actually, Saul intended to cause David's death at the hands of the Philistines. He didn't really think David was going to go get 100 foreskins. His full intention here was for David to die, trying to do as the king had asked. But David, in verse 27, and his men went out and killed 200 Philistines. 200. Not 100, like asked for. 200 Philistines. And brought their foreskins back and presented them in full payment to the king. Now Saul had nothing left to do but to give Michal, his daughter, to David, which was fine with Michal. I mean, remember, she's in love with David, So then it says again in verse 28, and trust me, we're getting to the psalm. I promise we're getting there, and we'll have time to cover this. But in verse 28, Saul realized that the Lord was with David. He also realized that Michal loved him. And in verse 29, his response to this was he became even more afraid of David, even more afraid of him. And as a result, Saul was David's enemy from then on. At this point, Saul was so completely consumed with his jealousy, with his resentment, his rage. He was a full-blown enemy of David after this. And why? The biggest reason I see here is because Saul recognized God's hand on David, and Saul knew it was no longer on him. And so he knew God was going to continue blessing David, and David was going to continue to prosper. Again, do we see Saul realizing, I need to restore my relationship with God? No, he was too caught up in these other emotions, which becomes a danger for any of us who decide to resent someone else, to become jealous of someone else, and the other behaviors that come with that, which we'll kind of see as David pours his heart out to God. But we've got to be very careful because jealousy can start out mild, and it can be a feeling we kind of want to push away, but all of a sudden it can completely consume us to a point where it really separates us from God. And that's something to be take very much as a warning here from Saul. And with that jealousy came a lot of other reactions, behaviors, and things that we see out of Saul. So now we're down to chapter 19. And in the beginning of chapter 19, we see how deep of an enemy, how far this had gone for Saul. Because Saul orders his men, his servants, and his son, Jonathan. He orders them to kill David. Now remember, Jonathan and David have become very, very, very good friends. And Jonathan's like, my father, you can't do this to David. Like, what? And so here's Jonathan, I'm sure, scrambling, going, what is my dad going to do? He wants me to kill my best friend. He has ordered his men to kill him. And as any good best friend, he runs and he warns David. I'm telling you, my dad wants to kill you. Now, understand, here's David. He is now the son-in-law to the king, the son-in-law. And yet, Saul wants him dead. Doesn't care about his daughter, doesn't care about his son's relationship. He wants him dead and orders even his son to go and kill him. So Jonathan's warning David, you've got to get out of here. I'm telling you, my dad's dangerous right now. You've got to go. But then Jonathan comes up with this plan of, you know what? I'm going to see what I can do. I'm going to see if I can talk to my dad and if I can convince him, David's really not out to get you. So they devise this plan, the boys, and any of you who've been around young guys or have teenage guys or whatever, you can kind of see, okay, here's what's going to go down. You're going to go and I'm going to have you hide here. And then I'm going to have this conversation with my dad. So, you can kind of listen in, but don't worry, whatever you can't hear, I'll fill you in how this goes. And I'll let you know if you're safe. So this conversation happens. And as you continue to go on down through chapter 19, the beginning there, you'll see this. And in this part, Jonathan is pleading with his dad and saying, listen, he's fighting for you. He's doing all this for you, Dad. I mean, he struck down Philistines. He's all of his actions have been a great advantage to you, Dad. I mean, this is not about David. David's not trying to come against you. He's doing this for you. Can't you see that? So he says, you saw it and rejoiced. So why would you sin against innocent blood? He's sitting there saying, Dad, David's innocent. Why would you sin against him by killing David for no reason? Why would you do this? So in this moment, it says Saul kind of calmed down and he listened, and he's listening to his son Jonathan's advice, and he swore an oath. In verse 6, it said he swore an oath. And he said, as surely as the Lord lives, David will not be killed. So Jonathan summoned David and told him all these words. So Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he began to serve him as he had before. So all of a sudden, here's this conversation with Jonathan. All is well. I mean, Saul has promised, I won't do anything. David's been restored, and David's now serving the king just as he had before, right? We stop there, move on. Everything's great. And hey, we can sit and say, you know what? God's hand was on David. So of course, everything in his life was great. See, I think sometimes we have this idea that if God's really taking care of us and God's hand is really on us, everything in our life will be perfect and wonderful. No. We see great victories that God gave David because he had favor in God's eyes. And yet all at the same time, we see the flip of that, and we see David being sought after for his head. We see somebody out to kill David, somebody tricking David, somebody playing with David, somebody horribly jealous and falsely accusing David of things. Now, does that seem like, wow, God's hand is on me, life is going to be great? No, we see that God's hand can be on you, but there are still people, and people do what people are going to do. And we still have a very real enemy who is out to take us down. And that's what David was dealing with. So sadly, that being said, the story did not end there. Because although David began to serve him as he did before, when war broke out, David went out and fought against the Philistines. And he defeated them with such great force that they fled from him. So here he is. I mean, he's doing it again. As soon as I send him out to war, they flee, they run away. They won't even fight David, So then in verse 9, now an evil spirit sent from the Lord came on Saul as he was sitting in his palace holding a spear. David, once again, was playing the lyre. Okay, he's sitting there playing music for Saul. We've heard this before. I think that's kind of where we started. So as David was playing the lyre, it says in verse 10, Saul tried to pin David to the wall with a spear. And as the spear struck the wall, David eluded Saul, ran away, and escaped that night. At this point, David knew it's not okay. I really haven't been restored in Saul's eyes. No, no. Because every little thing I do, suddenly he's mad at me again. Like I can't win. And David knows I've got to get out of here. I've got to get out of here. So now David is out hiding. And the story continues with what Michal is doing to kind of hide him and what Jonathan's doing to kind of hide him. But we're not going to get into that. The whole point is to give you this idea of this is where and what David had been dealing with when suddenly he is now running for his life. From who? The most powerful man in his kingdom, the most powerful man of his people, the king, King Saul. And here is David out hiding. Okay, so now that's going to take us to, here are the events. Here's where we over and over again saw, and the Lord was with David, and the Lord was, the Lord's hand was on David, and the Lord was blessing David. But Samuel doesn't give us a great picture of what that relationship with God looked like. So where we see this account in the Psalms is over in Psalm 59. So I'm going to turn my page and go over there. And if any of you would like to look along with that as well, we can kind of see and kind of think that backstory in our head as we think, now this is how David began to pour this out to God. So here he is running and afraid for his life, not sure when Saul's men are going to come looking for him or how long it's going to take them to find him. Okay? And so David begins to cry out to God. In Psalm 59, in verse 1, he says, "Rescue me from my enemies, my God. Protect me from those who rise up against me." This takes on a whole nother meaning when suddenly it starts with rescue me from my enemies. He has people who want him dead. He ran for his life. I'm sure he didn't have time to take much of anything with him, if anything at all. He was running for his life. Saul, right in his presence, when he's just sitting there playing music and trying to minister to the king, tried to take his life. And so suddenly when it says, rescue me from my enemies, my God, protect me from those who rise up against me, this takes on powerful meaning. He says, rescue me from those who practice sin and save me from men of bloodshed. Here we see the complete recognition of they're trying to kill me. Please, please save me from the sin that they want to do in this. And then he begins to explain himself to God. Have you ever felt the need to kind of explain? This is why I feel this way, God. In case you don't know what's going on in my life, I kind of feel the need to explain myself in case you haven't been noticing or paying attention. Now, do I think this was a way of putting, and as a matter of fact, I think this was a complete humbleness on David's part. See, David didn't think he should be God's number one priority. David didn't think, God is just here for me and to listen to me. No, he's sitting there saying, God, I'm not sure if you've noticed, but he says, Lord, they set an ambush for me. Powerful men attack me. I mean, they're out to get me. I mean, everywhere I turn, I'm in trouble. And he said, powerful men attack me. And then he defends himself. Have you ever defended yourself to God? He says, listen, God, it's not because of any sin or rebellion of mine. Listen, they want to kill me. They're setting an ambush for me. They're out to get me. And it's not my fault. I haven't done anything to them. He said, for no fault of mine, they run and take up a position. I did nothing to them. I've tried to just to be there to serve the king and to help the king, and I love the king and I love Jonathan and I love my wife, Michal. I've done nothing wrong. And yet they're out to get me. They're out to get me, God. Save me, rescue me. And then he says, awake to help me. Take notice of me. Lord of armies, you are the God of Israel. Now, do we really think that he meant, hey, wake up, God, notice? No, I don't think that was the tone this was in at all. This was in, a humble, like, God, please, like, look at me, please hear me. I am desperate for you right now. I need you to hear me, God, because I'm in a place and I'm in a mess and I don't know how to get out. I need you. And he says, please, God, the Lord of armies, you are the God of Israel. Rise up to punish all the nations. Do not show favor to any wicked traitors. He just lays it out. I don't want you to show favor to them, God. I need you to handle this. I need you to take care of this. Do not show them favor. They're wicked. They're evil. And he begins to explain. They return at evening, snarling like dogs, prowling around the city. Look, they spew from their mouths, sharp words from their lips, for who they say will hear. See, what he's saying here is, they're sitting there claiming that I've done this, and they're spreading lies about me. And then going, oh yeah, David, who are they going to believe? The king or you? He's saying, they're out to destroy me, like snarling dogs walking around a city trying to devour me, spreading their lies, spreading their rumors. Have you ever felt you were part of like a complete lie, a rumor that was being spread falsely about you? It's not a very good feeling. It's not a good place to be in. And David was feeling that very much, and very much recognizing the fact that Saul was king. And there was a great chance that the people would listen to Saul and believe all the lies that Saul was telling about David. And David's saying, listen, this is what they're doing. And they're saying, yeah, who do you think the people are going to listen to? He says in verse 8, but you laugh at them, Lord. You ridicule all the nations. He says, Lord, I know that you're above this because you know the truth. I know that you know this, and you laugh at them because you know what the truth is. And he says, and because of this, in verse 9, I will keep watch for you because God is my stronghold. My faithful God will come to meet me. He has such a deep-rooted, strong faith in God that he says, you know what? It doesn't matter what they say about me. It doesn't matter how much they accuse me falsely. It doesn't matter what the people choose to believe. God, I'm looking to you. I am resting on you because I know you are bigger than this, and I know that you know the truth. But the next verse here, he says, my faithful God will come to meet me. And I love this part. In verse 10, he says, God will let me look down on my adversaries. Now, if we read this wrong, and I think, maybe some could take it that, I'm going to look down on them. This wasn't in a place of being better than them, but it was, God, you're going to help keep me to where I don't stoop to their level. You're going to help keep me in a place where I don't need to fight back the way they're fighting me. I don't need to fight back against these rumors and against, all these lies that are coming against me. You're going to keep me above that. You're going to keep me in a place where I don't feel the need to do that, God, because you know the truth and you're my strength. You're my stronghold. You're my help. You will handle them, and you're going to keep me above them. Then he puts some specific requests in there. In verse 11, he says, do not kill them. Otherwise, my people will forget. He says, don't let them die. Don't just wipe them out. And then he begins to explain himself. By your power, make them homeless wanderers and bring them down, Lord, our shield. For the sins of their mouths and the words of their lips, let them be caught in their pride. Don't just wipe them out. Let them destroy themselves, is what David is saying here. Let people really see who they are and what they're about. Because in David's head, David's like, the only way they'll realize that it's not me is if they see that it's really King Saul, that it's really him. So don't just kill him. Let the people see who and what he really is, and let them be caught in their pride. They utter curses and lies. He says, consume them in rage. Consume them until they are gone. What does that mean? Consume them till they're gone, meaning let them destroy themselves. God, let them run with this until they ultimately destroy themselves. Because why? Then people will know throughout the earth that God rules over Jacob. So that God, they will see you as the good God that you are. And that Saul destroyed himself. You didn't do it. You didn't wipe him out. Here's David, even wanting to save his God's reputation. God, I'm not asking you to kill them for me. I'm asking you to let them destroy themselves. But keep me above this so that I don't stoop to this level and begin to react based on my emotions. Let me rest in you, God. He continues, and they return at evening, snarling like dogs and prowling around the city. They scavenge for food. They growl if they are not satisfied. If they don't get what they want, they get worse. They get angrier. He says, God, I know their hearts. They're not going to let this go, and it's going to get bad. But then here's the end of the psalm. But I, David, here's what I'm going to do. I will sing of your strength. And I love this because as we finish this psalm, David pours all this out and he defends himself. He lays out exactly what the people are doing in case God didn't know. You know, he's just making sure this is clear and that God notices the path that he's on. And then he follows with, but God, listen, for me, I will sing of your strength and will joyfully proclaim your faithful love in the morning. For you have been a stronghold for me, a refuge in my day of trouble. To you, my strength, I sing praises because God is my stronghold, my faithful God. See, David wasn't going to allow Saul or any of his enemies to steal his joy. He was saying, no, God, I am going to continue to joyfully proclaim your faithful love. He's not taking that from me. I'm not going down the path he is. I'm not meeting him with the same attitude he's displaying towards me. See, David recognized those as evil and from a source other than God. And David purposed, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to allow that to overcome me. He said, I'm going to hold on to my joy and I'm going to hold on to what I know. And I'm going to continue to praise you for the faithful and loving God that I know you are. This is what made David a man after God's own heart. It was his honesty and his willingness to speak to God and tell God the truth. And as we continue to look through this, we're going to see a lot of different things that David had to deal with. And many of us will find that as we deal with some of those things, even maybe what we dealt with today, being on the other side, or maybe we were on the side of the one who was jealous and allowed that to consume us for a while. And again, if that's the case, that is not of God. No, that spirit is not of God. That spirit of fear and not of God. And those were all things that Saul was struggling with. And yet, here was David on the other end of that. And if you've ever been on the other end of some of those emotions where you feel like, man, nothing I do wins. I can't win in this situation. And everybody's believing all of this. You know what? You just say, you know what, God, this is what's going on. But keep me above this. Don't let me stoop to this. And keep my eyes focused on you. And let me know that in your faithful and abiding love, you're going to handle this. You're going to take care of this. That's what a relationship with God looks like. Again, if we look at just Samuel, we see that God's hand was with David, that God's hand was on David. But when we look at the Psalms and we see how David pours his heart out to God, we see why. We see that relationship that David had with God, that relationship that each one of us need to continue to grow in as we walk this walk of faith. So I hope that was helpful and encouraging for you. And again, I'm sorry about all the technical issues that we dealt with this morning. And hopefully next week we'll figure out more. I don't know, maybe I'll do a little consult here once we get off of here. But it was great to have you with us. And my prayer and my hope is that you will continue to look at these passages that we read today and continue to ponder this through the rest of your week. And talk to God. Seek how you can have a stronger, relationship with him through your conversation with him. So thank you again for being here. And we're going to try to log out now and see how successful we are with that. Have a great day, everyone.
Okay.